Hi there, my name is Craig Brown, and I am the Partnerships and Development Manager for Digital Xtra Fund. What we're going to be talking about today is our main part of the fund, which is our grants program. It's the opportunity for schools and educational organizations to apply for funding for their extracurricular activities. It is an application process, so I'm here to speak a little bit about that and hopefully provide some insight for those of you who maybe have had a look at it and are not quite sure what we're looking for or are just a little bit intimidated because it is slightly an meaty application, but there's a lot of really important information there. And so I'm happy to help where I can. This year, we are awarding £75,000. That's a total amount to schools and organizations. Individual applicants can apply for up to £5,000 each, though. We are continuing to try and increase that level, though. So watch this space. There should be hopefully some good news coming soon. But at the moment, that level is £75,000. Up to £5,000 each, although they don't need to apply for that full amount. If a project only costs £2,500, then obviously they can apply for that as well. Part of the application, which we'll talk about, is describing your project plan and your budget. So the Digital Xtra Fund is open to a wide range of organizations. Obviously, schools are one of our main target areas, but any registered charity, registered company, school, college, university, local authority, trade body, anyone who's really a registered organization that is engaging young people aged 16 and under in digital tech through extracurricular activity can apply. So it's not really the who you are, but what you're doing that's important in terms of whether you're eligible or not. Yes, absolutely. Organizations that have applied in the past can reapply. However, we don't provide like-for-like funding. And what that means is that if you are reapplying, you either need to reapply for a new project, not necessarily a new project to you, but a new project to Digital Xtra Fund, or you have to apply for what we call an evolution or expansion of a previously supported project. So that would be a significant change. Perhaps you're delivering it in a new local authority or to a new target audience, or perhaps you're adding a whole new skill set to your previous project. In its purest sense, an extracurricular activity is any activity that engages young people in a safe and informal space outside of the classroom. But to be honest, when it comes to Digital Xtra Fund, sometimes this can be a bit of a gray area. Obviously, if you're talking about a lunchtime club or weekends or after school, it's quite clear cut that that's an extracurricular activity. However, we have supported organizations in the past that have come into the school and provided activities that maybe the school aren't able to deliver during their normal school day, and that's absolutely acceptable as well. Well, there's a number of objectives that we're trying to achieve, all of them related to increasing the talent pool of young people who might look at a career in tech. But at its core, we're looking to support exciting, high-quality activities that will engage young people 16 and under, teaching them digital skills. And that's a key word as well, digital skills. We're looking at not just skills like how to use Word or how to get on the internet or how to update your CV, but we're really looking for skills sort of taking the next step beyond digital literacy. So we're looking at coding, we're looking at cyber skills or data science, and we're looking to instill those into young people through extracurricular activity. We're also looking to help them understand what a career in tech would be or what a career using tech might be, break down some of those stereotypes that might be in place. And obviously, hopefully in the end, they'll end up following a pathway that can lead them into a career in tech, because at the moment, there's just purely not enough young people following that path. There's a term that's used, digital skills, and it's sort of an umbrella term. And it's because there's a lot of things that falls under digital skills. And all of them are important, but not all of them does Digital Xtra Fund support. So skills like using Microsoft Office or social media, or getting online to do your everyday things, which is increasingly important in today's society, that's not what's covered by the fund, but it is very important. What is covered by the fund is the types of skills that not only allow you to use technology, but to understand what's going on underneath, and being able to create new programs with these skills. So it could be things like coding, or cyber skills, or data analysis to understand what really is going on behind it. And then, like I say, to be able to take that knowledge and create new things. You do have to think about it. So it's not something that you can probably complete overnight, but it is simple and straightforward. And all the questions that are asked, I think, are important if you want to be successful in not just obviously your application, but in delivering your activity and engaging young people. And ultimately, that's what's important. Getting the grant is just the first step to success. So, yes, it is available online. If you go to our website, there is a button there that you can click apply. There's some further information there. And then you can actually download the application as a Word doc, as well as some guidelines in a PDF. And you can complete it offline, and then you would email it into us before the 22nd of April. The email is in the guidelines and in the application, but it's submissions@digitalxtrafund.scot, extra spelled with an X and not an E. But yeah, it should be fairly straightforward, but I'd really like to go through it if I could and talk about the parts, so that if anyone has any questions or something's not clear, then hopefully they can understand. So when you open it, you'll see that the first thing is the eligibility check. And this is just a very top level check to make sure that you are actually eligible to apply. Nothing in there should be particularly confusing. The first line is organization name. So just please make sure that you put your organization's name and not your name in that slot. And everything else should be pretty straightforward. For those of you who maybe have looked at this previously or been successful previously, you will notice there's only one new question in there in the eligibility check. Because of the coronavirus pandemic this year, we are asking that applicants have an opportunity to deliver things through remote learning or blended learning, should we get into a position where teaching is not possible anymore. Obviously, we hope this isn't going to be the case and that things will go ahead as planned. But we do have to be aware that is a risk, and so we have to plan for it. But there's a question about that in the actual application where you can discuss some of your plans as well. The next section you'll see is called main applicant. This is the person who's responsible for the project, responsible for the funding. Typically, it's also the person submitting the application, although not always. So you would put the details for this person in there. The next one is activity partners. And this would be anyone else who's also supporting the project. This is really important because as part of the application process, we need to make sure that there's no conflicts of interest. So we need to be aware of all the people who are involved in delivering the project, or all the organizations, more specifically, who are involved in delivering this project. The first question is summary of activity, and arguably this is the most important question. It sets the tone, it sets the picture for the whole application. And really, if you have to understand how these are evaluated, maybe to understand why this is important. So the applications are evaluated by a panel. Each application is independently evaluated by multiple different people on this panel. And then we come together at the end. And so these people come from various sectors, mostly from the tech sector, but there's also some from the education and skills sector, some from the public sector. And so they may or may not have any knowledge of your organization. They probably don't. They may or may not have any knowledge of your activity. And so you have to make things really, really clear. And you have to make sure that they understand in this question, after they read it, what you're trying to do. This question is really the what of your application, not the why or the who or the where. Those come later on. So you really need to make sure that you nail this one, because otherwise the rest of the application gets a little bit confusing. One suggestion that I often make to potential applicants is that they find someone who is not in their bubble, not in terms of pandemic, but bubble in terms of their knowledge bubble, and they get them to read this question. And if that person understands what they're trying to say, then it's a safe bet that our panelists will understand what they're trying to say as well. This is really where you can say the why, if you will, of your application, why you should be successful in your application. You can talk about how it aligns to the fund objectives, but you can also talk about some of your past successes and how those prove that you are going to be able to do what you would like to do. There's a lot of different ways that you can answer this question. You can answer it in point form. It doesn't have to necessarily just be paragraph. There is a word limit, so you want to make sure you try and get as much information as possible into that word limit. But yeah, it's also a very important section. But probably it's the best way to answer is to think of it as the why of your application. The second part of that question is about some specifically about cyber grants that we'll be offering this year. We're working with the cyber resilience team at Scottish Government to try and identify projects in Scotland that are engaging young people in cyber skills. And so they've put some funding behind that. And so specifically, we're looking for some projects that deal with cyber skills, cyber security, cyber resilience. There's specifically two parts of that. There's teaching young people to be safe online, but also then giving them the skills to perhaps pursue a career in cybersecurity. And so if you think that your project is follows those guidelines, then those objectives, then I would suggest completing this box, because it's an opportunity to sort of set yourself aside for that 10 grand. Now, obviously, if we receive multiple projects that are great in the area of cyber skills, then we have the opportunity to provide more than that. But at a minimum of at least 2 grants will go towards these projects. Just like anybody, we have our stakeholders, and they want to know what their funding is going towards. And so this is where we can help quantify that beforehand. And then at the end, when there's a final evaluation, we'll relook at these numbers and sort of get a more up-to-date figure. But yeah, this is where we look at both the location of the young people that will be engaged, as well as the gender, as well as the age group, which are sort of the 3 definitions that we use when looking at what our engagement are. And so, this year, where there is a potential focus on remote learning, we understand that might be a little bit more difficult in terms of the location. So we just asked you to sort of provide a best estimate, maybe based on what your marketing is, or what organizations you might be working with. This is by no means set in stone. We are a friendly, flexible charity. So, we understand things can change. And if anything in the past year has taught us is that, things change. But we just have to roll with the punches, and we understand that. So, we appreciate that things might not be exactly like this when you get to the end. But we just ask that you try and give your best estimate. It's a 2-part question as well. The first part is sort of asking about those 3 quantifiable definitions of your target audience. The second part is a bit more specific. So we say that Digital Xtra Fund is looking to engage all young people across Scotland, and ultimately that is absolutely our goal. We would love for every young person in Scotland to have access to extracurricular digital tech activities. But we do have 3 target audiences based on the current situation, being that some young people in Scotland, unfortunately, have less opportunity to engage with extracurricular tech than others. And so the first one of those is areas of high deprivation. So if your project is specifically targeting an area of high deprivation, we ask you to complete this question 3B in that first section, high deprivation. Similarly, if you're looking at targeting young people in areas of rural isolation, there's a part there. And the third one is young people who are in audiences underrepresented in tech. And usually this means girls and young women, although it doesn't exclusively have to mean that. Now, if you're not targeting one of those 3 groups, it doesn't mean that you're not eligible. You're still encouraged to apply. But we just ask that if you are, to highlight that in this section, because again, those are 3 areas, especially in the short term, that we are focusing on because of the lack of representation in the tech sector. So there's sort of, I guess you could classify it into 2 different groups. Maybe there's the people who will be delivering it, and then there's the people who are behind the scenes, and both are important in this question. So obviously the people who are delivering it will be perhaps your teachers or your educators who are on the front line. And then you might have a senior leadership team, like a deputy head or a head, or maybe if you're not a school, you might have a head of engagement or whatever. I think it's important to list those. When you as an evaluator are reading these, if it's just one person listed, that can sometimes be a bit of a concern, only because if that person gets sick or busy or moves on, we do worry about what will happen to the project. And so if you show that there is support from the senior leadership team or from someone higher up in the organization, there's a bit more confidence from us as a funder that if something does happen to this one particular person, that there will be, the project will still continue on. I think what's also important to note is if you listed any activity partners up above, to highlight who from that partner, who from that organization will be involved. And this will be the section in which you could do that. We're very fortunate to have a really good partnership with the Microbit Educational Foundation. They've donated over 3,000 microbits to us over the past few years, and we've in turn donated them to schools and organizations across the country. They're really keen to work with the grant recipients, and because of that support that they provided us, we have included this question that sort of highlights if your project is using microbits, so that we can pass that information on to them, and maybe we can explore some opportunities for further collaboration. I think what's also important to note, though, is that if you don't use microbits, that you won't be penalized. That's not necessarily what the point of this question is. It's not a scored question. It's purely to get information so that we can pass that on to the foundation. And while some of the other questions have changed a little bit over the years, this is the only new one for this year. So obviously, the past year has been a very challenging time for schools and organizations trying to engage young people. And we made the best of it for the past year, but let's be honest, moving forward, we need to be better prepared should the situation arise again. So we have included this question where if you are delivering in person, then we would ask for you to have processes and procedures in place should we go into another lockdown. Now, obviously, if you are 100% remote from the beginning, then this is a question to highlight that and to highlight why that might be to your advantage. But if you're not, if you are an in-person delivery method and you are thinking that you might have to go remote, or the situation arises where we'll have to go remote learning again, this is your opportunity to talk about how we're going to do that. I think what's key to remember is that when you're delivering a remote activity, that was once an in-person activity, you don't have to necessarily deliver like for like. We're not looking for that. We know that if you're dealing with a expensive kit or limited kit, that you might not be able to get that out to your young people, to your audience, if we go remote. But what we're looking is for, like I say, policies and procedures in place so that you can continue to engage young people in tech, and maybe look at sort of the core aims and objectives of your own project and how you can achieve those. So that could be through offline coding or offline or online activities that you can share as a group. It could be where they send their coding into you, or using some online platforms. If you were coding robots in your code club, then perhaps they could write the code offline and send that into you, and you could do a video of you testing their code or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I don't want to be too prescriptive, but I think what's important to remember is you don't necessarily have to do like for like delivery. You just have to still be able to engage young people in tech remotely. So this is something that has been evolving with the fund as it's continued to grow. It wasn't as big a part when I first joined in 2017, but it is definitely increasingly become part of it. I think the important reason for that is that we're trying to engage young people in tech, but I think young people want to know why. I mean, it's quite obvious what a lot of careers, traditional careers especially, are when you talk about doctors, nurses, police officers, lawyers, what have you. But to talk about a front-end developer or an AI specialist, not quite as clear what that is. And so this question is really trying to help young people understand what the opportunities are. And one of the, so part A is contextualizing skills. So why is coding a cat on a screen relevant to the real world? Or why is a little blue robot kicking a football relevant to the real world? And so this is what this question is all about. And so, there's lots of resources out there, and some of them we've listed in the guidelines if you're not sure. But we would definitely think that this is an important part of your application. Now, the second part of that question, part B, I would say is also important, although it's a lot more challenging. And actually, initially, when we first put this into the application, the idea of providing context to the activities that we support, the question was really only about engaging industry. And unfortunately, we found that this was a question that was that organizations and schools, quite frankly, struggled to answer. They weren't sure how to engage industry. Now, we obviously have industry partners that we work with, and we are continuing to look at how we can incorporate them with the grants recipients as well. But if you have your own connections through SDS or DYW or through your school, then this is an opportunity to highlight those and to talk about how you might have people from industry come in and talk about their careers. I've talked about how, because of the pandemic, it's important that we, understand that some of the limitations that might create. I would like you to plan for next year that things will be able to move ahead as normal, that kids will be able to work together, and that, we won't have lockdowns. I think one thing that we might struggle with next year is having non-school staff on site. And so, you might want to keep that in mind when you're talking about this question as well, that you might want to have remote engagement with some of those. But again, you're still going to have to engage with industry to achieve that. So that's what this question is really about. Part B, especially, like I say, I don't think it would necessarily break the application if you're not sure how to answer it. But I do think it's important to think about it, because at the end of the day, I think that's one of the keys to how we're going to get more young people to follow a career in tech. So anyone who has applied in the past might read this question and think it's new. It's not actually a new question, but we have greatly changed the wording, because so last year it was called promotion. How are you going to promote your activity? And a lot of the answers centered around, social media and putting tweets out, or putting posters up in the school. And those are all important, but I would almost consider them to be a baseline, that you absolutely need to do those. What we're really looking for is how you're going to cut through negative stereotypes, how you're going to get young people to attend when there's other activities that they might want to attend after school instead. So it's not just about getting the word out there, but it's about how you're actually going to get bums in seats. And that's what this question is really about, because at the end of the day, we can run and support all the activities we want, but if young people aren't attending, there's no point. So this is really what that question is about. Why will young people choose to go to your activity? There's sort of two reasons why we include this question. The first is probably a bit more obvious. I mentioned earlier, Digital Xtra Fund, like any other organization, any other charity, we have our own stakeholders, and we need to show them that what we're doing is creating an impact. So this is part of that. As part of the once you receive your grant, as part of the process, you receive 60% of the funding up front. And then at the midpoint, you receive 30% of the funding. You have to submit a midpoint evaluation form. And at the end of the project, the final 10% is paid upon receipt of the final evaluation. And a lot of what we'll do is we'll go back, we'll look at some of the targets and outcomes that you submitted, but we'll also ask you what went well and what could have been better. And so that's for us to learn as well and to share that knowledge. The other reason for this question, though, which maybe isn't as obvious, is that information is really important to the people who are delivering the projects as well. So it might be that they need to look at if they want to get more funding in the future from other sources, they're going to need to show that what they did originally and the project that was funded by Digital Xtra Fund was impactful. That could be your senior leadership team or your local authority, or it could be other potential grant providers or sponsors. But not only that, it's important, and some people don't understand how important evaluation is. But if you're moving your project forward, you want to know what went well, and you want to know how you could be better as well, so you can make improvements and engage more young people. And so while this question is important to me as a funder, it's also important to you when you want to move forward. And I think that's why we put it in there, to make sure that people understand that. I mentioned earlier that the ultimate goal of Digital Xtra Fund is for every young person in Scotland to have access to tech activities. The only way we're going to achieve that is if the tech activities that we've supported in the first place continue to run. And so that's what this question is. We really want to know that beyond that first year, and I know that first year is sort of important to us in terms of the impact and like I said, our stakeholders, but really the ultimate goal would be for these to continue to run. And so we want to know how you plan to do that. There isn't really a right or wrong answer for this, other than we want to make sure that the projects continue to engage young people beyond the first year. As a funding charity, a relatively small one, we obviously want to support as much as we can, but we also want to get value for our money. So this is where you can outline what it is exactly that you will be purchasing with the grant. It could be kit, but it also could be training. We also support, for example, if you need a supply teacher to cover a class while the person who will be delivering the extracurricular activity goes on training, you can input that as well. I think what's important is that anything that's in this question in this budget has to tie back to the extracurricular activity. I think that's extremely important. But I'm fully aware, and I hope that the things that are purchased in this, they're used, especially the training, in the day-to-day teaching and day-to-day learning as well. That I don't want Digital Xtra Fund to support something in a silo. But I think for the purposes of the application, it's important that everything that you budget for ties back to the extracurricular activity. So there is a list of what we can and can't fund in the guidelines. So I would definitely refer back to that. I think what's also important is if your project is engaging some young people age over the age of 16, you can still apply, but the percentage of your costs would have to relate to how many young people are age 16 and under. So, for example, if 75% of your participants are age 16 and under, then we can fund 75% of the project. In addition to listing your budget items, you also want to make sure that you add any in-kind support that you're getting. I think this is especially important as well. So you can apply for a grant up to £5,000, but for example, if your project costs a total of £10,000, you can still apply. Digital Extra Fund will support up to £5,000 of it, and then you need to show where that other £5,000 will come from, and that could be in-kind support, but it could also be through other grant funders or sponsors or through your own budget. We just need to make sure that obviously the full cost of the project is covered. If the other funding is not confirmed and you can't begin the project till, say, October when the funding is confirmed, that's absolutely fine again, but you would not receive your first grant payment until all the funding for the total cost of the project is confirmed. If I'm honest, this is one of those questions where people either answer it really well or they do struggle sometimes with it. And so I think it's important to take the time to think about this. We've listed it, date, deliverable, outcome in sort of like an Excel spreadsheet type of format, but it might be easier to think of it like a calendar. If you were going to put dates into your calendar to remember, then whether that be training, whether that be delivering different activities, time to do the evaluation, think about it that way and put it into this spreadsheet like that. I think one of the other errors that a lot of people often make is that they don't give themselves enough time at the beginning to ensure that the kit is purchased or the training is in place, especially if you're having to go through like a procurement office or something like that. That can add a lot of time to getting the kit. So you need to make sure you take that into consideration. And like I said, if you're doing training with a bunch of people, schedules are always notoriously difficult to coordinate. So you need to make sure that you give yourself time for that. A lot of people will say, oh, we'll put 2 weeks in for purchasing and training, and we'll get started in the third week after the grant starts. But in my experience, especially if you're starting a code club from scratch or some type of club from scratch, a 2 week is not enough, even if you've done the planning in advance. So the other thing that's important to note is that the project delivery timeline for this grant cycle is from the 1st of July 2021 to the 30th of June 2022. So anything that's in this calendar should be between those dates, and you really shouldn't start anything before that because funding won't be confirmed before that. I suppose obviously the one exception to that would be deciding and planning what you're going to do because you need to do this for the application. But in terms of providing training, and especially in terms of engaging young people, you really want to make sure that it's in those dates because that's the dates for the grant. We're really excited to work with our partners, and as you say, they are the ones that back us. So without them, there wouldn't be a Digital Extra Fund. So if I could, I'd just like to take a moment. I'd like to mention a few of them. AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, Baillie Gifford, CGI, JP Morgan, Scottish Government, and Skills Development Scotland. They are our Gigabyte partners. And then we're also supported by Accenture, BT, Cirrus Logic, Incremental Group, Microbit Educational Foundation, Scotland is, and Skyscanner as our Megabyte partners. And we, like I said, we are hopeful to have a couple more announcements in the next few weeks. But that at this moment, that's who supports us. So in addition to providing financial support, they also have representatives who take part in the evaluation panel. They really enjoy reading the applications and seeing what it is that their funding is going towards. I think that's probably one of the things they enjoy most about Digital Extra Fund. I'm also really excited to announce that we've just opened applications for a new community and grants officer. And so that part of that role will be actually working with the grant recipients and our industry partners to facilitate engagement. It's something that I've definitely talked about in the past with our grant recipients and our partners, but it's just perhaps something that we haven't done enough of, mostly due to the amount of time that it takes to sometimes do that. But this dedicated role will be able to do that. So I'm really excited to see what they'll be able to bring to the table in 2021-22.
Thank you for your time this afternoon, Craig. It's been incredibly interesting finding out more about the Digital Extra Fund and how people can get involved and help teach our young people the valuable skills we need to move forward as a digital society and a digital nation. So where can people go for more information? And are there any events coming up where they can perhaps learn more?
Yeah, so the best place to go is our website, which is www.digitalextrafund, all one word. And like I said, extra spelled with an X, so it's XTRA .scot. So that's the best place to go, both for information about the application process, but about the charity in general. We have a really active Twitter account as well, so that's at Digital Extra Fund, and you can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. In terms of upcoming events, I'm really excited to be working with the Scot Leaders Meetup, and you can find them on Twitter at STEM Scot Meetup. And that's led by Tanya Howden from Heart of Midlothian Innovation Centre and Dr. Kelly Gardner from Codebase Stirling. And they've had some great events already. The last one was about gender balance in STEM clubs with Dr. Claire Quigley. So I'm going to be meeting with them on the 12th of April, and we're going to do a live question and answer about Digital Extra Fund and about the application. So if you've watched these videos and I've maybe missed something or you have a question about something, definitely tune in on that. More information will be found on their Twitter handle as well as on the Digital Extra Fund when it becomes available. But you'll be able to answer questions, and I'll be there, and I'll hopefully answer them.
Craig, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brian.